LeSean McCoy, former NFL running back who now has a platform with FS1, taking shots at Eric Bieniemy, now the Commanders' assistant head coach and offensive coordinator. After being the OC for 5 years with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, he was a successor to Matt Nagy, who got a head coaching job, even though Andy Reid runs the offense there. And Nagy was the successor to Doug Peterson, who got a head coaching job, even though Andy Reid runs the offense there. That knocks down one of the theories that is percolating, that Andy Reid was somehow holding Eric Bieniemy back. Well, now no one is going to hold Bieniemy back because his head coach is a defensive guy. But McCoy, dusting off some past criticism of Bieniemy, and this time around, McCoy is saying Bieniemy doesn't run the passing game, or didn't run the passing game in Kansas City, which obviously undermines his credentials and pushes back against the idea he should be a head coach. I'm glad that players came out and pushed back against McCoy. Let's have everybody's opinion out there. Let's hear from all these players. If McCoy's going to pop off, let's hear from everybody about what Eric Bieniemy did and didn't do in Kansas City. Because what happens is, Myles, and we texted about this earlier, there are people out there who want to say, see, that's why he's not a head coach. See, it's one guy. Right. It's one guy who's clearly upset with how his career ended in Kansas City, how it started, how it finished. He wasn't the guy in Kansas City. He's got some hard feelings, and he's throwing darts at Eric Bieniemy. It's one guy. If we're going to do that, let's balance one guy against all the other guys who have spoken out.
Well, and it's funny because this stuff kind of was popped up earlier in the 2022 offseason, where I don't remember exactly what the criticism was that LeSean McCoy had levied against Eric Bieniemy. But at that time, Andy Reid was asked about it. And he said that, I think that sometimes there may be some hard feelings when things don't go the way you want them to internally, right? And at that point, McCoy had been a part of the Kansas City Chiefs, and then he wasn't very effective toward the end of his career, right? And then that was one of the things that happened. And Travis Kelce was also asked about it, and he said something pretty similar, where it's like, sometimes you have one perspective that comes from maybe you were coached a little bit hard, or maybe things didn't exactly turn out the way you wanted them to in a certain situation. But when I hear what McCoy had to say about Eric Bieniemy having quote, nothing to do with the passing game for the Kansas City Chiefs, it just doesn't ring true based on what we've heard from people within the Chiefs, like Chad Henne, who told The Athletic after Super Bowl 57 that Eric Bieniemy was the one who pointed out the night before that how the Eagles responded to what the Jaguars had run with basically that same corn dog play. This was back in week 4 of the 2022 season, where the Jaguars scored their second touchdown. They basically ran that same jet motion stop, and then they go back to the outside, and the man was wide open, right? That's something that Eric Bieniemy pointed out on film to the team. So if you're saying that he had nothing to do with the passing game, I think that has a lot to do with the passing game, right? And LeSean McCoy hadn't been there for years. So why is it that we just run to say, oh, see, he said it. He was there at one point. That must mean it's absolutely true. When we've got quotes from like less than 2 weeks ago that tell us that that's not true. That's the stuff that kind of bothers me about this, Mike.
Well, and I look at it this way. Tyreek Hill is one of the players who came out on the record to dispute LeSean McCoy. And Tyreek Hill right now is not the guy who has the clear bias to support anything Chiefs related. After he left last year, he said some things that, look, he was trying to boost his own guy, Tua Tagovailoa, but he took some shots at the Chiefs. He took some shots at Patrick Mahomes. He made it clear that he wasn't happy with his role in the offense. His natural bias and inclination would have been to blame anyone he could. And if he could have thrown a rock or two at Eric Bieniemy, he would have, and he still would. And the fact that Tyreek Hill has nothing negative to say about Bieniemy says everything to me. You have one guy who's disgruntled. He's not happy with the fact that he was deactivated late in that season with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now he's got a platform, and he's in a position to speak his mind, to air his grievances, and there are others in the media who will seize on that one voice, that one isolated voice, regardless of his biases against Eric Bieniemy. They'll seize on that voice and say, aha, that's why he's not a head coach. It has nothing to do with the NFL's decades-long issue with racial bias in the hiring of head coaches. That has nothing to do with it. That's all false. That's all phony. It's all because of LeSean McCoy, because this one person who's upset about how his time with the Chiefs went is saying these things. And let's ignore the fact that there are multiple other voices contradicting it.
Yeah. And I mean, I thought Jason Reed of Anscape, the ESPN vertical, had a really good point in the piece he wrote on Bieniemy the other day. It was basically that, while we can talk about how Bieniemy's going someplace and he may or may not need to prove himself or whatever, right? Why does he not deserve the same chance that, Cliff Kingsbury, a Matt Rule, or a Nathaniel Hackett had to fail when ostensibly they had much weaker resumes, especially when it comes to NFL experience, than somebody like Eric Bieniemy? I mean, you can say whatever it is, and obviously all three of those guys were not good head coaches. But why is it that Eric Bieniemy doesn't even get the chance to prove that he can't be a good head coach based on what his resume is? I don't know.
Well, and this dawned on me after watching Bomani Jones delve into the NFL's significant financial investment in social justice causes, $250 million. It dwarfs the money the NFL contributes to other causes. And there's a sweet spot the NFL tries to find where you contribute the money, but if you start doing tangible things, that's when you rile up 30% of the audience that is going to be mad at you for being woke. And I feel like one of the reasons at the end of the day, Eric Bieniemy isn't a head coach is because owners are concerned that 30% of their fan base, and that same 30% is in every fan base, maybe in some it's a higher percentage than others, but that 30% is out there. If you give Eric Bieniemy a head coaching job, those same voices that are seizing on what LeSean McCoy had to say are going to be the ones who are riling up the folks who will say, the owner of my favorite team gave in to the woke mob. I'm not going to watch that team anymore. I'm not going to buy tickets anymore. I'm not going to buy jerseys anymore because my owner doesn't have the courage to stand up to the woke mob. That's what I think at the end of the day is holding Eric Bieniemy back far more than any other factor.
Yeah, it's not Andy Reid. It's not anything else. I mean, right? It has to be something like that. And I think that that's a really good point, Mike, because I think it does place something specific as to what is in the back of the NFL owners' minds other than, Eric Bieniemy. I mean, he's worked with Andy Reid, and Andy Reid's coaching tree has been largely successful when those people have gone on to other places, certainly more successful than the Bill Belichick coaching tree. Right. And you look at all the people that he has, worked with that have then gone on and then not just been to playoffs, but won Super Bowls. So there are things that must be in the back of the owners' minds. And I think that must be it, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know, the last couple of years, especially, you've just been trying to figure out what could it possibly be where, you watch Eric Bieniemy's press conferences and he comes across as somebody who is very professional, knows what he is talking about, very polite with the media. So this whole he doesn't interview well thing has never really struck me as something that makes sense. So what could it possibly be? I mean, yeah, I think race plays a factor, but I think that what the response could be from the fans, that's something that I don't know that I've heard much of, Mike, and I think that's a great point.
Well, it's why the NFL tiptoed so carefully around issues with the anthem, around Colin Kaepernick. They were, and this came out during the Kaepernick litigation. He filed the arbitration claim against the NFL. There was some discovery that was done. It was all under an order of secrecy, but I picked up enough during that process to know that the NFL's internal studies were focused more on the 30% that was likely to get upset if they did business with Colin Kaepernick than the 30% that would be upset if they didn't. Mm-hmm. They were more sensitive to the 30% that were likely to huff and puff and maybe for a week or two blow someone's house down until they came back and watched football again. But the NFL, hypersensitive to that end of the spectrum, not the other end of the spectrum. And that would explain it. That would make sense. And I'm a big fan of Occam's razors, the only razor I shave with. The simplest explanation is usually the truth. And I think, to me, when we look at the broader lens of the NFL's experience over the past decade, that's the simplest explanation. You've got owners in the back of their mind who were worried about that 30%, riling up that 30%. Something like this would, because we know that there are voices in the media that would immediately start stirring that pot. They gave in to the woke mob, and you're going to have people saying, I'm done. I'm not renewing my season tickets. I'm burning my jerseys, whatever it may be. You know that would happen if and when Eric Bieniemy got a head coaching job.
That's so silly, because Eric Bieniemy has worked with one of the greatest coaches of all time and one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and they're always giving him credit for stuff. So it's like, well, what am I missing here? When I see stuff like that, it's like I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, what am I missing that these folks over here are like, well, he can't do blah, and he's not really doing this, and this is all because it's Andy Reid, and it's this and it's that. Well, why is Andy Reid getting up and basically standing on the table in an owners meeting and being like, why haven't you guys hired this person? It's baffling to me. It really is.
It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with the Commanders. And I don't know if you've seen my take on the whole Lamar Jackson thing, because it is odd to me that Ron Rivera is so open with this notion that they're not pursuing any veteran quarterbacks. And I just wonder if the next thing we hear after they pursue Lamar Jackson is, well, that's what we thought when we had no idea to believe Lamar Jackson would be available via the non-exclusive franchise tag. Why in the world would the Ravens make him available that way? So hell yes, the moment that he was available, because we never thought it would happen. We did everything we could to try to get him. Having a guy like Lamar Jackson available changes plans. And, here's the problem. If they would get him and it goes well, it's not because of Eric Bieniemy. It's because he has Lamar Jackson. That becomes the argument next year when the head coaching cycle gives Bieniemy the cold shoulder again.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, he's just worked with two of the greatest quarterbacks we've seen in the last 10 years. So why is it that he should get any credit when it's just their greatness? Whatever.
Yeah. And if Sam Howell does well this year, it's Sam Howell. Well, they got a steal. He would have been a first-round pick if he'd come out a year earlier than he did. Yeah, there's always going to be something. And it's reality. And I feel bad for Bieniemy because he gets caught in this, just like Tua gets caught in the concussion thing. Eric Bieniemy has got caught in this, and he really didn't want it. He didn't ask for it. But that's where we are, and we'll learn a lot in 2023 as to whether or not Bieniemy can finally springboard into a head coaching job.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.